time out of your day. I'll start my talk by telling you a little bit about my personal background. Then I'll talk about my painting processes and techniques, and then some themes and motives in my work. So to start, I'm from North Carolina. I went to college in Philadelphia. I went to Moore College of Art and Design. At Moore College, I received a classical education in art, and I also chose to minor in business, graphic design, both to make me marketable, and fine arts to have more of a chance to experiment with my work and get more painting practice. Okay. So I'm going to show you some different examples of my work, but the one main theme in all of my work is that it's always of a subject, of an animal or a person, of someone that you can kind of see and empathize with. So first, some more about my background. In 2010, I applied for an international travel fellowship to visit India. I really wanted to go and work with children in need. This is a photo of my exhibition proposal. I had to do a written proposal explaining why I wanted to go to India and how it would help my artwork. You can see, along with my written proposal, I had to show my artwork. I showed 3 oil paintings, and I had a hand-bound children's book. I was very lucky. I won the money, and I got to go to India. I first went to Jaipur, where I taught English in a small street settlement, shanty town or slum called Kaputli-Nagar. This is a picture you can see. It's on the edge of a wasteland with lots of trash and garbage. And I had a wonderful time working with the children. It's my first real chance teaching, and I had the most amazing time. The children were so inspiring, and I learned so much from them. Also, in my spare time, I volunteered at an orphanage for children who were HIV positive and whose parents had recently died of AIDS. And with them, I did more fun activities. But this was a really significant learning opportunity for me and my first chance to work with children. After that, I traveled to New Delhi, which is a huge, sprawling, dirty city, and I didn't like nearly as much as Jaipur. But in New Delhi, I worked for Roli Books, which is a leading publishing company in India, and I did graphic design for them, mostly book layouts and book covers. And I could do the graphic design work, I could use the skills I learned in school, but I found it very boring and tedious and monotonous, especially coming right after getting to work with the children and having that very motivating, inspiring experience. So having these 2 experiences really helped me make my next life choice and come here to Korea and continue teaching English. All right, I'm going to talk next about my painting processes. As you can see looking around the room, all these paintings are oil paintings. I work almost exclusively in oils now. I began working in oils 3 years ago, and I really enjoyed the variety of techniques. Oils are a very complex medium. There's a lot of different factors. Each different color of oil paint has a different drying time, a different consistency. So there's really a lot to learn and a lot of different varieties you can learn, which is why I love oil painting. This is really embarrassing, but I'm showing some of my first oil paintings ever because often when I tell people I paint oil, they say, "Oh, that's really hard, I can't do oils." And I just wanted to mention that it is something you have to learn. Your first oil painting won't look good, but once you learn how to handle the medium, then you can start to do what you want with it and get the kind of effects you want. So the first painting there is a study I did of a fennel plant, and it's not a good painting, but I learned how to blend oils, and that was kind of, oh, this is very different from acrylic. I can actually blend with it. So I learned about blending in that painting. The second painting I did I don't have here because it was horrible and I never took a picture of it. But I worked thickly, and my colors became very muddy and dirty because I didn't realize, wait 3 days and it will dry, and then you can work over it. So after that, I was quite scared of oils, and I would have quite liked to quit. But I gave it one more shot with this trompe-l'oeil. Trompe-l'oeil is it's a French word that means fools the eye. And trompe-l'oeils are usually life-size paintings, and they want to look as realistic as possible. It wants to look like you could just reach out and pick it up. So trompe-l'oeils are often a painting of a window or of a box, something that you could really look into. And they're always very detail-driven. Sometimes this kind of painting is also called photorealistic. So this painting I worked very thinly, and I learned more about glazing because I was way too scared to try thick painting again. And this is another painting I did, and I was learning about skin tones. And these skin tones aren't very good, but at the time, I was really proud of them. So some more about oil painting. There's two main techniques you need to understand when you're painting with oils: indirect painting and direct painting. The first example you can see, my pointer, this is what's called indirect painting. Really what they mean is transparent painting. You use the paint thinly and you can see through the paint, which is why we call it indirect. Light comes through the paint film, hits the back of the canvas or board, and comes back to your eye. So it's called indirect painting. The second way of painting is direct painting or opaque painting, where you work thickly on the canvas and the color you see is the color of the paint right in front of you. It's no layering of paint. These examples of painting are by a painter called Don Gray, and he quite uses trompe-l'oeil. The brushes really look quite real there, not as though he painted them. So most painters, once they understand these techniques and the different things you can do with them, can go on and use a combination of the two. Here are some examples of different painters that use these techniques. The first painting is by Van Eyck, and it is indirect painting, which is how European painters started to paint. They didn't understand about using thick paints. They only painted with very thin layers. And this very classical way of painting, most painters will start with an underpainting with a very low chroma spectrum of color, a lot of grays and browns. And then once those colors have dried, they'll glaze on very thin layers of colors until they have the final finished full color painting. Unfortunately, these are all very dark, and there's no way you can see really the different effects of painting in these different ways. But the second painting is by Rembrandt, and Rembrandt paints in a combination of the two. In his darks, he paints very thinly and very indirectly, very transparently, and in his lights, he paints thickly and opaquely. And this is kind of a cliche in oil painting, because it's just so easy to do with the oil paints, and it's kind of what the oil paints naturally want to do. Most dark pigments paint, it's easy to work transparently, and most whites or light paint just naturally sort of are thick and slow dry. And then the last painting by Mary Cassatt is an Impressionist painting, and all the Impressionists work directly. Thick paint, what you see is what's directly on the surface of the paint. You can't see through the paint. A little bit about my process. I don't like to do underpaintings. It just takes too long for me. I don't have the patience to wait around. So I do a charcoal underdrawing. And this is an example where I think my charcoal underdrawing is better than my finished painting, which happens sometimes, and it's very frustrating. But sometimes I do quite a well-rendered underdrawing, and sometimes I just do an outline. It's really just to help me map out what I want to do. This is another example where I'm more focused on finding my values to create volume. And you can see I'm kind of just blocking in. Everywhere that's in shadow is just dark, and everywhere that's in light is just white. And this is a technique called finding the shadow shapes, and it can really help you create volume. Okay, now I'll talk a little about my portfolio. I break my work into 3 different portfolios: children's book illustrations, portraits, and fine arts. I'll talk first about portraits. Oh, and one more thing. The one thing that is really common between all my work is that it all represents the natural world. It all looks like something you might see in real life. And the reason I do this is because what I'm most interested in doing in my work is communicating with the viewer. I don't want to do a painting that just is really fun for me and makes me happy to look at it. I want it to say something to anyone that looks at it. So I want to be able to communicate across language barriers, education levels, cultures, and personalities. So my way of doing that is to paint something that is recognizable, comprehensible, and understandable. So children's book illustrations. I've known I wanted to be a children's book illustrator since as long as I can remember. Before I knew how to read and write, I used to staple pieces of paper together draw pictures on all of the pages, and ask my mother to write in the words of my story. So it's just something I've always known about myself. When I got a little older, I started thinking, oh, that's very silly, I need to make money and do something more sensible. But lucky for me, when it came time to choosing a college, my mother sat me down and made me apply to some art schools. And once I got into art schools and got scholarships, I realized, oh, maybe my mom has a point and I should go in this direction. And I'm glad that at least I gave it a shot. So one of the first children's books I worked on as an adult, or since I was 9, was this book called How the Painted Hunting Dog Got His Spots. A painted hunting dog is another word for African wild dog. And African wild dogs are a species of dog in Africa which are coming very close to becoming extinct. They're very endangered, at-risk species. And part of the reason I chose to do this book was to educate people about this unusual species and to try to fundraise for them. So in my story, African wild dog, becomes impatient waiting for the gods to finish creating the earth and giving color to everything. So he picks up the palette and starts to paint his friends. And of course, lion must be painted first. And dog is very sloppy painter, so he gets himself completely splattered in paint. And as a result, he ends up with his silly speckledy coat. And his punishment from the gods is to keep his spotty coat. So the next children's book I worked on is called Jugaad, and this is a book I worked on when I first got back from India. My favorite word I learned when I was in India was this word Jugaad. Jugaad means innovatively fixing things with whatever is at hand. It's about creatively solving your problems even when you don't have much to use to fix them. So I love this word, so I made it the name of my main character, which is an Indian street dog. Street dogs are everywhere in India, and it's really hard for an animal lover like me to see them and not be able to help or do anything. But they're everywhere, and I was told to be afraid of them when I went to India. I was warned not to touch them, not to have anything to do with them. But there was this cute little black puppy living on the steps of my building in Delhi. So one day I was getting home, I was tired after an 8-hour day at work, and he was just curled up there, and I said, "Good dog," and he just came up to me wagging his tail, which I didn't expect. And this dog was so sweet and friendly. Even though I'd seen him being yelled at in the street, he was always very happy if I was willing to take a second to pet him, which surprised me, but kind of is a good example of what my experience was like in India. Often things were very harsh and very hard to come to terms with, but people or animals would always surprise you with their kindness, compassion, the way that they could bounce back from hard circumstances. So I made my main character this little black puppy, Jugaad. My other main intent with this book was to show children from different countries what it's like in India. I wanted to show everyday sights because I felt like before I went to India, I had I heard so many different things about India, but mostly I'd see pictures of beautiful Taj Mahal or pictures of terrible slums, and there was kind of no in-between. So I just wanted to show some pictures of everyday life. So this is an Indian market. I was also in India for the dry season into the monsoon season, and it's very rare to ever have a drop of rain before monsoons. So in my story, my little dog feels his first few drops of rain as the monsoon starts, and he's very startled and surprised. And the monkeys laugh at him because he doesn't know what rain is. And then he gets swept up in the monsoon water. It was unbelievable to me how streets could flood in a matter of minutes and how torrential the rain was. So I have him being scared, swept away in the water, and then in the end he's saved and a child puts him into a saucepan and helps him float away. So in my story, the child is using his Jugaad to figure out how to help the puppy. And I had the puppy saved by a child because my experience working with the children in the slums and how amazed I was at how they looked after each other. And really, the older ones brought up the younger children. They carried them home from the park and really looked after them. So the last children's book I've been working on is a commission piece I did, and it's called Harry the White Carousel Horse. And I've been working on this since getting to India. I kind of had to get going and get working on it. since getting here in Korea, I had to get working on it as quickly as possible. And there's two examples from this book in the gallery here. But this is a story about a real carousel in Washington, D.C. And on this carousel, there's one horse that hasn't been painted. And the writer of the story noticed that no children ever seem to ride on this poor horse. So in the story, here the white carousel horse is very unhappy because no one wants to ride him. So that night he has a dream and flies around and visits other horse sculptures around the world. And in the end learns to be happy that some children do prefer to ride him. Alright, now I'll talk a little about portraits. I became interested in portraits about 2 years ago. And this painting is one of my first paintings I did when I was really thinking about what a portrait is and how important different features of the face are. And this painting is currently in an exhibition just outside of Chicago called Women's Works, and their opening is next week. So I think it's really important to realize that a portrait isn't just a simple replica of what someone looks like. With a painting, we can do more than just mimic it. We can try to show some of the person's personality and what their character is like. The other important thing about a portrait is that it's not just a photograph. An oil painting can last for hundreds of years, so it's something that you can really pass down through generations. So I started working on an animal portrait portfolio once I sort of realized there isn't much of a market. Most people don't really see the value in having a painted portrait because photographs are so cheap and accessible. But my friend was pointing out to me that in America, people are happy to spend more on their pets than they do on their children. So I thought, well, maybe people won't pay for a portrait of their child, but maybe one of their dog or cat. So I started building this portfolio. And I also just really enjoy it. I really love animals. And being such an animal lover, I can often see more personality in animals than people can. So it's easy for me to get to know a dog and show more personality than maybe another painter could. So, memory portraits. While I was in India, I worked on this series of small postcard-sized portraits to give to people that didn't have many photographs of themselves, because it's so easy and accessible and cheap for us to have as many photographs of ourselves as we want, but people in poorer places can't afford to chronicle their lives with photographs the way we can. So I did some oil paintings for them. This is another portrait I did trying to show more of someone's inner feelings than just how their face looks. Okay, fine arts. So the reason I call this portfolio my fine arts portfolio is because these are pieces that aren't commissioned. They're not pieces I do because someone else wants me to or because they make money. These are just pieces I do for my own personal growth. And most of them I feel really compelled to make, and they're often driven by kind of humanitarian motives, problems I see in the world. So this is a painting of a child in Africa, and I was thinking about issues of people not having clean drinking water and how some people have to spend 10 hours a day just walking to and fro to get drinking water. All of my paintings are really, as I mentioned before, inspired by what I think of as a someone. For me, a someone can be a dog who needs help or a person. So this is another street dog. It's been a big theme in my work ever since India. This is a painting of a man who's worked at a shipyard as a shipbreaker, and he has to work in very dangerous working conditions and with very dangerous chemicals with no safety equipment. You can see he just has a rag over his face to protect him from the chemicals and toxins. So something that is important for me in my work is that people feel an emotion when they look at it, whether it's feeling happy, seeing a children's book illustration, or upset when they see someone else's suffering. So another street dog. This is a woman walking alone in Saudi Arabia, and she is taking a big risk. She's doing something very unsafe by walking unescorted. For everyone, we can't just go outside when we want to or when we need to buy something. In some countries, it's harder than that, and I wanted to highlight that. This is a painting I did for an exhibition called the Heart for Hope exhibition. This exhibition is commemorating the 1-year anniversary of the Japanese tsunami, and they are fundraising to raise money for the survivors. And so this painting is being auctioned. I think their opening might be today too. Yeah, so their opening, I guess, might have happened already. This is another series I did. I was thinking about issues of children and how often children don't have a voice, and a lot of times their issues go unheard. And so I wanted to do these paintings and kind of make people look at them. It's so easy to hear on the news and kind of just let it go over your head, because you can't always think that much about other people's suffering. It hurts too much. But I wanted to try to make people look and make people not just say, oh, yeah, those people are in trouble, but they're other. They're not me. I don't have to feel bad. Trying to make you look and see them as another suffering human being that you can have empathy and compassion for. This is a painting of one of my students in India walking barefoot to school through the mud and the dirt. All right, enough about that. Let's talk a little about the paintings you see here today. So the title of this exhibition is Portraits of Life, People, Animal, Places. Now the definition of a portrait is quite strict. It's a person, usually the face, a painting or drawing. But for me, an animal has almost as much personality as a person, so I consider all of my paintings here to be portraits, because every one of them is of someone, whether it's a dog or a child playing in the snow or a monk ringing a bell. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the paintings. Then in the back there's some paintings I did of pets, cat portrait, just a couple cute ones, one of a girl playing with a cat, another one of a girl wearing earmuffs, because I couldn't believe the big earmuffs when I first got here. And I thought they were so funny, but then I bought myself a pair and started wearing them. And then on the next wall there's more children's book illustrations. You can kind of see there's a bit of a snow theme going on here. I've always hated winter. I hate the cold, but I came here just in time for winter and sort of learned how to dress more warmly and learned that skiing is amazing and really, really fun. So I've kind of started to embrace cold since coming here. Then there's a couple paintings from my White Carousel children's book. And then lastly up here, there's a painting I did after visiting a Buddhist temple, and I got to see the monk ringing this huge bell at noon, and I thought that was amazing. So I'm finished. I guess we'll have some time for questions, and there's some snacks in the back, and you can ask me questions. Thank you all so much for coming.